Aunt Jing held on to Mu Chun and descended from a mountain peak. She looked at the tall young man before her. His face bore the striking handsomeness of his father, yet also the gentleness of her own, making him undeniably more appealing and less sharp-edged. "Mother, are you really leaving?" Mu Chun sensed something and grasped Aunt Jing's hand, speaking with a hint of sadness. Aunt Jing nodded gently, saying, "Although this is just a spiritual body of mine, staying too long might bring you unnecessary trouble." "Mother, what exactly is your identity? Where are you trapped now? Tell me, I won't act rashly." Mu Chun gritted his teeth and said. Aunt Jing sighed softly, her hand reaching to caress the young man's face. "These things aren't the right time for you to know. I never intended for you to leave the northern spirit realm. Although living that way might have been ordinary, as long as you stayed safe, that would have been my greatest wish. In that case, I would never see you again." Mu Chun chuckled bitterly. "Growing up without a mother wasn't easy, but I know my father had his own struggles, so I had to mature early." Upon hearing this, Aunt Jing's eyes turned red, unable to hold back her tears. For her, nothing in the world was more important than her husband and child understanding her. The child she once left behind in swaddling clothes had truly grown up and was so understanding. It made her feel that all the loneliness over the years had been worth it. "Mother, don't worry. Right now, I may be weak, but one day I will grow strong. No matter how terrifying the unknown place holding you back is, I will bring you home. This is something I promised Father," Mu Chun said slowly, but his voice carried unwavering determination. "And with how powerful you are as your son, you should have some faith in me," Mu Chun smiled. Aunt Jing managed a tearful smile and ruffled Mu Chun's head. "All right, I believe in you, but I still won't tell you everything. When you become truly strong, you'll naturally understand some of it." Hearing this, Mu Chun could only nod helplessly. Aunt Jing waved her hand, and the figures of Ling Shi and Luo Li, who had been standing nearby, slightly moved before they involuntarily appeared beside Mu Chun. "Ling Shi, from now on, please take care of Mu Chun. Think of yourself as his older sister. If he misbehaves, feel free to discipline him." "He should not be your match yet," Aunt Jing said, smiling at Ling Shi. Mu Chun smiled awkwardly, while Ling Shi and Luo Li both grinned. "Aunt Jing, don't worry, I won't let anything happen to him," Ling Shi nodded softly. "Mu Chun, you can't bully Ling Shi. The Floating Pagoda spiritual art has 2 volumes, Yin and Yang. You practice the Yang volume, and Ling Shi practices the Yin volume. This technique is special. Yang is the main force, and Yin assists. In our place, those who cultivate the Yin volume are called Xun'er, as their spiritual energy greatly benefits those practicing the Yang volume. However, Mother doesn't want you using this method, understand?" Aunt Jing looked at Mu Chun, her expression growing serious for the first time. Mu Chun glanced at the blushing Ling Shi and nodded, feeling a little guilty. He realized that their previous approach might have been something like that, though he had been unaware at the time. Still, it left him feeling a bit uneasy. Seeing this, Aunt Jing smiled with relief and said, "Your father may not be much in terms of skill, but at least he hasn't disappointed me when it comes to teaching you." Aunt Jing then looked at Ling Shi with sympathy, gently touching her cheek. "Your memories haven't been completely erased, but sealed. I can't help you break the seal for now." "Why?" Ling Shi hurriedly asked. "Aren't you aware of what kind of person you are?" Aunt Jing sighed. "The memories that have been sealed are all related to me. They're not happy memories for you. And with them, you'd know where I am, but I don't want you coming there. But I want to save Aunt Jing." Ling Shi bit her red lip and said, "If you really want to help me, take care of Mu Chun." Aunt Jing smiled gently. Ling Shi fell silent for a moment, then nodded. However, there was a trace of stubbornness in her eyes. Aunt Jing, knowing her nature, didn't say more. She knew this wouldn't stop Ling Shi from searching for her, but it would at least delay it for a while. "You're Luo Li, right?" Aunt Jing turned her gaze to the girl standing quietly beside Mu Chun, a gentle smile on her face. Luo Li glanced at Mu Chun and nodded awkwardly. Mu Chen's taste in people is better than his father's. Aunt Jing smiled slightly. Though Luo Li was young, she possessed a grace that ordinary girls couldn't match. Such a girl would surely be the center of attention wherever she went. Aunt Jing clearly had a good impression of Luo Li. No, Aunt Jing, you're amazing. You're also my goal. Luo Li's fair, delicate face flushed slightly. She wasn't lying. Aunt Jing's powerful presence earlier had truly impressed her. If she could be like her, she could certainly shoulder the responsibility of the Luo God clan. Aunt Jing held Luo Li's slender hand and looked at the Luo God sword in her grip. Her eyes showed a moment of surprise. You're from the Luo God clan? What's your relationship with Luo Zhangqiang? Upon hearing Luo Zhangqiang's name, Luo Li seemed slightly startled. He's my great-grandfather, but he passed away long ago. Aunt Jing, have you met him? I haven't met him, but in my place, records of top existences in the Great Thousand Worlds are kept. I've seen information about Luo Zhangqiang and this sword. Aunt Jing shook her head slightly. Luo Li understood now. From what she knew, her great-grandfather had almost reached the level of a heavenly supreme and was among the top figures in the Luo God clan's legacy. So it wasn't surprising that this information would be collected by others. Somu Chen actually brought back the little princess of the Luo God clan. His taste is really good, Aunt Jing chuckled, causing Luo Li's face to turn red. Mu Chen, standing beside her, could only give a dry laugh. Well, my time is running out, Aunt Jing sighed softly, her gaze filled with longing and reluctance as she looked at Mu Chen. She didn't know when they would meet again. Mu Chen looked at Aunt Jing's fading form, his eyes red. Clenching his teeth, he said, Mom, wait for me. No matter how terrifying the place is that's holding you, or how strong the people trying to keep us apart are, I won't give up. Once I'm strong enough, I'll bring you home. Okay. Aunt Jing's eyes shimmered with comforting tears, and she nodded. Then I'll wait for you, Mu Chen. You must stay alive. Aunt Jing's hand gripped Mu Chen's tightly, but she couldn't apply any force. Her body was growing fainter, slowly dissipating. Her eyes still held an unbreakable longing. Her body eventually disappeared. Mu Chen stared at the fading figure and knelt down, deeply bowing his head. Mom, don't worry. Our family will reunite. Luo Li and Ling, she stood quietly beside him. Seeing him like that, their noses tingled with emotion. A gentle breeze stirred, lifting their clothes. The scene felt faintly desolate. This was a mysterious, unknown place. In this space, huge black towers floated in the sky, black halos radiating from them, shrouding the world in a mysterious and eerie light. In the depths of this space, a towering, giant pagoda stood, its body piercing through the clouds, making it seem almost ethereal. At the very top of the tower, in a shadowed area, a woman in a white dress sat cross-legged. Suddenly, her body trembled. Her closed eyes slowly opened, her hands tightly clenched, tears flowing down her cheeks. Mu Chen, my child, she murmured, her voice filled with endless longing. However, the tears in her eyes only lasted a moment before being evaporated. As her expression remained indifferent, the surrounding dark space rippled with waves, as though an ancient, withered face like that of a dead tree was emerging from the shadows. Its eyes gleamed with a dark light as it gazed at Aunt Jing, and the buzzing sound echoed angrily through the darkness. Was that fluctuation earlier your spirit body? How long do you plan to hide that abomination bloodline? The ancient face, seemingly emerging from the darkness, glared furiously at the figure in white, its angry voice booming and shaking the space. This woman in white was, of course, Mu Chen's mother, but at this moment, she merely cast a cold glance at the old face and said faintly, I don't know what you're talking about. Qing Yanjing, at this point, you're still going to be stubborn? Do you think that by bringing back a little girl with no blood relation to you, and having her practice the Futu divine art in scroll, you can deceive us? The ancient face said sharply. Aunt Jing's beautiful eyes turned cold as she stared at the old face. I never intended to deceive anyone with Ling Shi. I never said Ling Shi was blood related to me. It's just that you stubborn, narrow-minded old fools are too foolish to even consider this possibility. By having her practice the Futu divine art in scroll, you only wanted to confuse our attention, didn't you? You want to cover for your true abomination bloodline. The ancient face continued, yelling. The Futu Divine Art Ein Scroll was Ling Shi's choice. I did not interfere in her decision. When I first brought her back, I didn't have much in mind. I only took pity on her. But who could have guessed that you old fools would become so overly suspicious, not even sparing an innocent little girl? Aunt Jing sneered. The divine bloodline inside you is clearly separated. It must have been taken by the abomination bloodline. You've definitely set a seal on it, right? That's why we couldn't detect it all these years. Qing Yinjing, you are the goddess of our clan, with an extraordinary status and unparalleled talent. In the entire Great Thousand Worlds, the only one who could be a match for you is Emo Xingtian of the Emo Ku Divine Clan, one of the ancient divine clans like ours. If you two were to unite, it would be immensely beneficial to both our clans. Furthermore, by joining with Emo Xingtian, you could break through the rules and ascend to power. At that time, you would be the ruler of our clan. The ancient face, filled with anger, almost roared. But once you went out for training, you fell in love with some insignificant insect from who knows where, even damaging your divine bloodline and giving birth to an abomination bloodline. Where do you think you're placing our clan's eternal heritage? How could you fall for such an insect? Doesn't he pale in comparison to Emo Xingtian? He is the true king. Under his leadership, the Emo Ku Divine Clan would shine again, and you could have achieved that too. But instead, you chose to do this. Do you deserve the training our clan gave you? Aunt Jing furrowed her brows and said, just because Emo Xingtian is great, does that mean I must like him? First Elder, it seems you've been too out of touch for too long. Everything in your eyes is probably just a tool to increase our clan's power, so you don't understand what true love means. Qing Yinjing, do you know the purpose of our clan's existence? Do you understand our significance to the Great Thousand Worlds? Love, such a selfish thing, how could it ever exist in our clan? The ancient face roared. First Elder, our clan's past is indeed my pride, but you are too immersed in that pride. It only causes you to become stagnant. Before our clan had such pride, did we ever live like this? Did we ever have the rules you speak of? Aunt Jing replied indifferently. In the dark space, the ancient face seemed to fall silent for a moment before speaking in a deep voice. It seems you really are clouded by that so-called love, to the point where you even question our clan's pride. Aunt Jing lightly shook her head. It was truly futile to try to appeal to the emotions of these stubborn old fools. Although you are now constantly protecting that abomination bloodline, I don't believe you can protect him forever without us finding out. Once we discover him, we will certainly capture him and extract his divine bloodline. Though he carries the blood of our clan, it's tainted and impure because of his father's lowly origins. Our clan will never recognize him. We will erase such existences. The First Elder said slowly. As soon as his words fell, the expression of Aunt Jing, who was seated in the dimness, suddenly turned icy cold. A surging aura engulfed the space, causing the entire dark area to shake violently, as if it were on the brink of collapse. Qing Yinjing, do you intend to defy the clan rules? The First Elder, sensing the change, immediately bellowed. Aunt Jing took a deep breath, suppressing the overwhelming aura. Her gaze, cold as ice, fixed upon the elderly face. Each word she spoke was deliberate. First Elder, although I have willingly accepted punishment over the years, I hope you can understand why I have done so. It's not because I fear you, but because I don't want our clan to suffer because of my actions. However, if you dare harm my child, don't blame me for showing no mercy. At that point, even if you manage to kill me, I will make sure you won't have it easy. I am certain, First Elder, that you will fall with me. Qing Yinjing, you are too bold. The First Elder roared in fury, veins bulging on his ancient face. A terrifying pressure surged outward, making the entire dark space tremble violently. Yet, Aunt Jing remained unfazed, her gaze cold as she stared at the First Elder. Buzz. As the First Elder raged, the dim space rippled once again, and several other enormous faces, just as old and weathered, emerged from the shadows. Each showed a different expression. First Elder, please calm down, one voice advised. Little Jing, there's no need to provoke the First Elder like this, another said. These massive faces spoke up to mediate between the two. Esteemed elders, I never intended to offend anyone, but there are some outdated rules that must be changed. Is our clan's bloodline really as noble as you think it is? Our ancestors didn't rise to the top of the world from a position of nobility. They endured hardships and only then reached the pinnacle of the world. Aunt Jing said lightly, so why should we look down on them? As for my child, who can say he won't surpass me? Do you think you've achieved all this by yourself? Hasn't the clan's guidance played a part? Without your help, that abomination bloodline would have amounted to nothing, and without any background, what could it have achieved? The divine blood in its body is a waste. The first elder sneered. In the great thousand worlds, there are countless top-tier experts. Some of the best even came from humble origins, some from lower realms, with no background at all. Yet, they rose to fame in the great thousand worlds, didn't they? Even your so-called Imoku, whom you regard as extraordinary, was once driven back by the Flame Emperor when he tried to invade the boundless fire domain. And in this world, besides the Flame Emperor, there is also the martial ancestor, the azure-robed sword saint, the guardian of the undying land. Aunt Jing's face remained calm as names of renowned figures, all famous across the great thousand worlds, echoed through the dim space. These top-tier experts, when they started, had no powerful backgrounds. They simply had the heart of a true warrior, and that's why they became legends in the great thousand worlds. So, First Elder, if you believe that becoming a true powerhouse requires nothing but cultivation and resources, then perhaps you are gravely mistaken. Aunt Jing continued with a calm tone. The First Elder, his ancient face emerging from the dark space, subtly changed. He was slightly angered and wanted to refute, but was momentarily speechless. In the end, all he could do was let out a cold snort and say, no matter how you argue, you cannot change the decision of the Elders' Council. Aunt Jing lowered her gaze slightly and said, how you choose is your business, and how I choose will be mine. I have deep feelings for our clan, but if it really comes to that. She didn't finish speaking but slowly closed her eyes, choosing not to continue speaking with these stubborn old fools. Seeing this, the First Elder could only huff in frustration. The ripples spread once again, and the massive, ancient faces slowly faded away into the darkness. Once the faces disappeared, Aunt Jing opened her eyes, her hands clenched tightly. She let out a soft sigh. She knew that her words alone wouldn't sway these deeply entrenched old fools. They would still seek out Mu Chen's whereabouts. However, she also believed her earlier words would leave some impact on them. After all, she was not someone weak. Even within this clan, her power ranked highly. Such a powerful level of expert cannot be cultivated merely through so-called resources. Therefore, they should not dare to pressure her too much, which will also give Mu Chen more time. She believes in her child. If Mu Chen spends this life quietly in the northern spirit realm as an ordinary person, she would be content. After all, as a mother, all she wants is for Mu Chen to be safe. But now, Mu Chen has clearly taken another path. The boy has grown tall and no longer cries like the infant he once was. He left the small northern spirit realm and entered the Northern Song Spirit Academy, one of the 5 great academies. Moreover, she can see that Mu Chen is outstanding. He is rapidly unlocking his potential. The path that child will take in the future may even surpass hers. Although the elders don't believe it, she has no doubt about it. As for the path Mu Chen has chosen, though she feels a bit sentimental and heartbroken, she ultimately feels a sense of pride. Her child is not ordinary. One day, those skeptical looks will be shocked by him. But that will take time. True power needs to be honed over time, and when he sheds all his superficial layers, it will be his moment to shine in the vast world of the great thousand realms. Aunt Jing clenched her hands tightly, her expression gradually softening. Her soft murmur echoed slowly in the dim space. Mu Chen, since you've chosen this path, I will support you without reservation. I will be here, waiting for the moment when your name resonates throughout the great thousand realms. The battle between the Northern Song Spirit Academy and the Dragon Demon Palace quietly came to an end on the Northern Song continent. This war undoubtedly shook the entire Northern Song continent. No one expected the Dragon Demon Palace to suddenly launch an attack on the Northern Song Spirit Academy, and the subsequent twists and turns can only be described as dramatic. Originally, the Dragon Demon Palace had the upper hand due to their perfect strategy. But with the appearance of a mysterious woman, their advantage was completely shattered. Afterward, their forces were routed. Even the Black Dragon Supreme, along with the 6 Supremes inside the palace, suffered heavy casualties. In the end, 3 of the 6 Supremes were slain, leaving only 3 severely injured who managed to escape. After that, the mysterious woman made a powerful move, forcing the Wu Yang ancestor, who had reached the 9th grade supreme strength, to retreat in shock. Her astonishing abilities left all the major figures on the northern Tsang continent in stunned silence. With the defeat of the Dragon Demon Palace, their power rapidly declined. Although they still had 3 Supremes remaining, they no longer had the strength to compete with the Northern Tsang Spirit Academy. Therefore, after the battle, the Dragon Demon Palace's influence shrank quickly. They abandoned the territories they had painstakingly built and retreated to their headquarters because they could sense that the Northern Tsang Spirit Academy would not let this opportunity slip by to completely annihilate them. As they anticipated, on the second day after the battle, many elders from the Northern Tsang Spirit Academy mobilized, their momentum shaking the world. The forces on all sides were startled. For years, the Northern Tsang Spirit Academy had quietly stood on the continent, but because of their gentle nature, people never realized just how sharp their fangs were. Some even seemed to have underestimated the true strength of this giant. At this moment, that underestimation was completely erased. They felt it firsthand. The Northern Tsang Spirit Academy's display of fangs was nothing short of shocking. The Northern Tsang Spirit Academy deployed all its strong experts, relentlessly attacking the Dragon Demon Palace's various hideouts. Facing the overwhelming power of the Northern Tsang Spirit Academy, the morale of the Dragon Demon Palace collapsed. They fled in chaos, with some even defecting from the palace. At this point, the Dragon Demon Palace had already fallen apart. Even the Black Dragon Supreme hid and dared not appear. The others, too, did not dare to confront the Northern Tsang Spirit Academy head-on. As a result, in just 3 days, the Dragon Demon Palace's branches on the Northern Tsang continent were almost completely destroyed. After 3 days, the Northern Tsang Spirit Academy's forces reached the Dragon Demon Palace's lair, an ancient palace hidden beneath the earth. Once they arrived here, the Northern Tsang Spirit Academy's unstoppable momentum finally slowed. This ancient spirit array is incredibly powerful. To activate it, at least 5 Supremes are needed. When the Dragon Demon Palace was defeated in the past, the North Tsang Spirit Academy also advanced here. However, even then, despite the North Abyss Dragon Kuan's efforts, they could not break the array. As a result, they had to retreat, leading to the bitter consequences that followed. With this past experience in mind, this time, Dean Taizong was clearly determined to completely eliminate the Dragon Demon Palace as a threat. Even though the Dragon Demon Palace had activated the ancient spirit array again, he still issued orders for the powerful members of the North Tsang Spirit Academy to relentlessly attack it, attempting to break it down. However, this approach seemed ineffective. Even though only 3 Supremes remained in the Dragon Demon Palace, making it difficult to fully unleash the power of the ancient spirit array, its might was still not to be underestimated. Reckless attacks would only waste energy. Seeing the attack fail, Dean Taizong reluctantly sent for Ling Shi from the North Tsang Spirit Academy. Ling Shi usually didn't get involved in such matters, and even Dean Taizong was unsure whether she would act this time. Yet, to his surprise, she arrived swiftly, her presence fierce and filled with murderous intent. Clearly, her hatred for the Dragon Demon Palace was no less than Dean Taizong's. Upon arriving, Ling Shi wasted no time and immediately began studying the ancient spirit array. Her expertise in spirit arrays was not as great as Aunt Jing's, but compared to Mu Chun, she was far superior. Despite the power of this ancient array, it had not been fully activated at that moment. After immersing herself in it for several days, Ling Shi began to decipher some of its patterns. Beneath the dim underground, monstrous waves of energy stirred. Deep in the earth, a massive palace coiled like a dragon, while outside it, a vast light curtain enveloped the area. The light curtain was somewhat murky, with ancient patterns spreading like the lines on a turtle's shell, exuding a sense of heaviness. In the sky outside the light curtain, Ling Shi floated in midair, her icy eyes gazing at the faint ancient spirit array. She then turned to look at Dean Taitsong and asked, "Have everything been prepared as I instructed?" Dean Taitsong nodded immediately. "Senior North Abyss, when we disrupt this ancient spirit array, please make your move and destroy it at once." Ling Shi looked at the North Abyss Dragon Kuan. "Understood." North Abyss Dragon Kuan nodded slowly, his gaze filled with coldness as it lingered on the Dragon Demon Palace. Ling Shi raised her jade hand and commanded sharply, "Begin!" Boom. At her command, the powerful members of the North Song Spirit Academy behind her unleashed an overwhelming surge of spiritual energy. Waves of spiritual light shot out, sweeping across the sky and illuminating the underground like daylight. The vast array of light beams, like a torrential downpour, fell upon certain parts of the ancient spirit array. The light curtain rippled, sending waves across its surface. As the ripples spread, some of the ancient patterns within the spirit array began to dim. Ling Shi raised her jade hand again and suddenly waved it. Dean Taitsong, Hall Master Mou, Elder Zhu Tian, and other supreme-level experts all acted at this moment. With a wave of their hands, their spiritual power formed massive pillars, falling from the sky and forcefully striking the ancient patterns in the spirit array that had dimmed. Sizzle! Sizzle! The piercing sound echoed as the ancient spirit array shook violently. Where the spiritual power pillars landed, the ancient patterns faded even further, and several pillars of energy began to sink into the array. Buzz! Buzz! The pillars of spiritual energy seemed to block the flow of spiritual power within the ancient spirit array, causing the entire light curtain to grow dim. Chaotic waves spread out, and in the very center of the light curtain, a tiny crack appeared. Senior North Abyss. Ling Shi's eyes narrowed as she called out. Boom. North Abyss Dragon Kuan stepped forward, his figure seemingly teleporting to the crack in the light curtain. He threw a punch, causing the space around it to shatter. His heavy fist, as if weighing 1,000 mountains, landed with a deafening crash on the crack. The entire ancient spirit array trembled violently at this moment. In an instant, the leaders, including Dean Taitsong, were filled with astonishment as they watched crack after crack appear, centered around the North Abyss Dragon Kuan's fist. The cracks rapidly spread, and in just a few breaths, they engulfed the entire ancient spirit array. Boom! When the cracks reached their limit, the ancient spirit array could no longer withstand the pressure. With a deafening explosion, the array shattered completely. A terrifying shockwave swept through, sending even Dean Taitsong and the others flying backward. Bang! Bang! Inside the ancient spirit array, the Dragon Demon Palace was hit by a destructive shockwave. The palace collapsed, and countless figures exploded into a mist of blood under the force of the blast. The blood mist rose, and the entire Dragon Demon Palace was filled with wails of despair. Dean Taitsong, the North Abyss Dragon Kuan, and the others scanned the ruins below, only to find no sign of the Black Dragon Supreme and the others. Their brows furrowed in unison. There, spiritual array fluctuations. Elder Lingxi suddenly pointed towards the deepest part. The North Abyss Dragon Kuan moved swiftly, appearing in that deep area. His eyes scanned the surroundings, and his expression shifted slightly. Before him was a vast abyss, but inside it, a thick blood sea spread, exuding an overwhelming murderous aura that continuously emanated from the depths. At that moment, above the blood sea, dozens of figures were gathering the murderous energy, and as the energy converged, a blood-red spirit array formed beneath their feet. Among these figures was the Black Dragon Supreme, whose face had turned pale. Upon seeing the North Abyss Dragon Kuan, his face grew even paler. Interrupt them. That's a teleportation spirit array capable of crossing space. They're trying to escape. Elder Lingxi's face changed slightly as she cried out. Before her words even finished, the North Abyss Dragon Kuan struck. A palm shot out, and a black glow surged like feathers tearing through space, swiftly piercing through the bodies of the figures, killing them instantly. The feathers contained an extremely domineering force, shattering their divine souls as they pierced their bodies. Seeing this, the Black Dragon Supreme and the two remaining Supreme Experts' faces changed dramatically. They immediately glared at the North Abyss Dragon Kuin and the others with a look of deep resentment. With a change of hand seals, they spat out a mouthful of essence blood, and the blood-red spirit array beneath their feet erupted in a crimson glow, enveloping their bodies. Haha, Dean Taitsong, you think you can destroy my Dragon Demon Palace so easily? As long as I have life, I'll always have the means to fight back. This time, you're lucky. But we will return, and when we do, it will be the day we bloodbath your sacred spirit academy. The black blood engulfed their bodies, and the Black Dragon Supreme bellowed fiercely, his voice full of hatred. Not if you can't leave. The North Abyss Dragon Kuin stepped forward, his figure flickering as he appeared outside the bloodlight. Then, with several powerful strikes, it felt as though he was piercing through space, landing heavily on the Black Dragon Supreme and the other two. The Black Dragon Supreme and the others spat blood, their spiritual energy wavering to the brink of collapse. However, just as the North Abyss Dragon Kuin prepared to deliver the final blow, the bloodlight had already expanded, enveloping them. The space then distorted, and the three figures vanished. The North Abyss Dragon Kuin's eyes grew cold. His withered hand reached into the chaotic space and pulled fiercely. Blood sprayed out from the spatial rift, accompanied by a faint, sorrowful scream. The North Abyss Dragon Kuin sneered and withdrew his hand, revealing three blood-soaked arms. They escaped? Dean Taitsong asked, rushing over. I disturbed their teleportation and severely injured them. With one arm destroyed, they are already on the brink of death. Even if they manage to teleport, they will be gravely wounded and will never pose a significant threat again. The North Abyss Dragon Kuin replied, shaking his head. The Dragon Demon Palace is finished. Even if the Black Dragon Supreme survives, they're nothing more than a stray dog, no longer a threat. Dean Taitsong smiled, his expression finally relaxing completely. He knew that the toxic force of the Dragon Demon Palace had finally been eradicated from the North Tsang continent. The campaign to annihilate the Dragon Demon Palace lasted nearly 10 days before finally coming to an end. Many forces secretly sighed in relief over this, but fortunately, the North Tsang Spiritual Academy did not have ambitions to dominate. Otherwise, perhaps no force on the North Tsang continent would be able to rival them. However, even so, after witnessing the true might of the North Tsang Spiritual Academy, some top forces adjusted their mindset. In the past, due to the Academy's lukewarm rise, some of the top forces didn't pay much attention to it. Yet, after this, they finally realized that the fierce tiger lying low on the North Tsang continent only enjoyed napping. Once this tiger woke up, its fangs would still be as ferocious as ever. While the entire North Tsang continent was shaken by the North Tsang Spiritual Academy's annihilation of the Dragon Demon Palace, inside the Academy, the atmosphere was especially festive. Countless students cheered in joy. Over the years, every time a student from the Academy went out to train, they faced threats from the Dragon Demon Palace. If they were unlucky enough to encounter characters like Emo Xingtian or Devil Dragonchild, they might never return. So, whenever students set out, they were extremely cautious. Now, this tumor in the hearts of all the students had finally been removed. How could they not leap for joy? In the freshman district, on a small pavilion, Mu Chun sat cross-legged on the platform. He gazed at the cheering North Tsang Spiritual Academy, then looked up at the vast, endless sky. Spiritual beasts flew across the sky, their crisp crane calls echoing in the air. It had only been a little over a year since he came to the North Tsang Spiritual Academy, but Mu Chun could clearly feel his growth. When he first entered, he was just a freshman who hadn't even stepped into the merging heaven stage. Yet now, he had reached the heaven-reaching stage and had gained the highest reputation in the academy. Without realizing it, the young man had begun to transform and shine brightly. Mu Chun smiled slightly. If his father knew, he would probably feel proud of him. Of course, the most important thing was that he had truly found his mother. Although she was just a spirit body, it gave Mu Chen endless confidence. He believed that as long as he kept growing stronger, one day, he would fulfill his promise to his father. "Father, don't worry. I will definitely bring mother back." Mu Chen clenched his fist and whispered to himself, "Still thinking about Aunt Jing?" A soft voice suddenly came from behind. Mu Chen turned around to see a girl in a black dress standing behind him. Her long hair cascaded down, her skin as white as snow, and her delicate face was like fine porcelain, making people want to cherish it. Mu Chen stared at her for a moment, momentarily stunned. In just a year, the girl had grown even more graceful. Her figure had become even more alluring, with a long, fair neck wrapped in a dress, and her slender waist and perfect legs adding to her beauty. While he was growing, the girl beside him had also blossomed into a breathtaking beauty. Mu Chen felt a stir in his heart. Luoli noticed Mu Chen's intense gaze, his eyes burning like flames, which caused her face to flush slightly. Mu Chen, this guy, was becoming less and less subtle about his feelings in front of her. "Have you not had enough of looking?" Luoli finally couldn't hold back Mu Chen's aggressive gaze, her cheeks turning red as she pouted. Mu Chen leapt down and wrapped his arm around Luoli's slender waist. He leaned close to her delicate ear and whispered, "But little Luoli, you see how much my mother likes you. When will you give her a little grandson?" Luoli was momentarily stunned, and then her face turned bright red, embarrassed and angry as she glared at Mu Chen. This guy was getting more and more outrageous, daring to say such things. Mu Chen chuckled upon seeing Luoli's flustered reaction. He wanted to tease her some more, but then he saw Luoli's small hand gripping the hilt of a sword. Her long, graceful fingers lightly flicked, and the Luo god sword was drawn halfway, a cold gleam shooting out and shining directly at Mu Chen's throat. The chill made Mu Chen shiver slightly. Ahem. Mu Chen cleared his throat and carefully grasped Luoli's small hand, pushing the sword back into its sheath with an awkward expression. Luoli shot him a glare, but when she saw his reluctant expression, she hesitated for a moment. Then, with a blush on her face, she stood on tiptoe and gently kissed Mu Chen on the lips. That soft warmth made Mu Chen's heart tremble. Luoli placed her hands on Mu Chen's chest and pushed him back slightly. Her face was flushed with an alluring red as she scolded, "Stop being mischievous. The dean called us?" Mu Chen was taken aback. "It's about the North Song Gate. In half a year, the Spiritual Academy Grand Competition will be upon us. We must begin making as much progress as we can in strengthening our power, or else," Luoli said softly. Mu Chen furrowed his brows slightly. Although North Song Spiritual Academy was one of the 5 major academies, it had the shallowest foundation among them. In recent years, it had consistently ranked at the bottom of the 5, and if they couldn't achieve decent results in this Spiritual Academy Grand Competition, it was likely that someone would seize the opportunity to strip them of their position as one of the 5 great academies. Although it was merely a title, for the Spiritual Academy, it was a matter of great importance. "Let's go," Mu Chen nodded, taking Luoli's hand as they swiftly headed toward the central hall of North Song Spiritual Academy. A few minutes later, Mu Chen and Luoli entered the hall. Inside, they saw Shan Songxing, Li Xiantong, Su Xian, He Yao, Zhao Qingshan, and other top-ranking figures from the top 10 of the North Song Spiritual Academy's heavenly ranking. Not only that, but at the head of the hall were Grand Song Academy Headmaster, North Abyss Dragon Kuan, and the 5 heavenly seed elders. The scale of this gathering made the atmosphere feel especially solemn. As Mu Chen entered, everyone in the hall immediately turned their attention to him. Their gazes were filled with complexity and admiration. Since his battle at Sacred Spirit Mountain, where he had slain Imo Xingtian, Mu Chen had firmly secured his position as the strongest student in North Song Spiritual Academy. Although he had never directly challenged Shan Songxing, the reigning champion of the heavenly ranking, everyone knew that he had the power to do so. Mu Chen and Luoli sensed the solemn atmosphere and exchanged a glance before walking into the hall and standing next to Shan Songxing, sharing a smile. When Grand Song Academy Headmaster saw Mu Chen, he also smiled slightly. He was increasingly impressed with this young man. It had been many years since North Song Spiritual Academy had produced such a prodigy. Students, I have gathered you here today mainly because of the upcoming Spiritual Academy Grand Competition 6 months from now, Grand Song Academy headmaster said, his gaze sweeping over the hall. His expression grew serious as he continued. As I've mentioned before, for the past few years, North Song Spiritual Academy has consistently ranked last in the Spiritual Academy Grand Competition, even falling behind some other top spiritual academies. This has placed a tremendous amount of pressure on us. If our results are still poor in this upcoming competition, I believe the title of one of the 5 great academies will be taken from us. A heavy silence fell over the hall. Shin Songxing, Li Xiantong, and the others all wore solemn expressions. After years of cultivating in North Song Spiritual Academy, they had developed a deep connection with it. They took great pride in being part of the academy, and the thought of losing their position among the 5 great academies was something they couldn't accept. For many years, North Song Spiritual Academy had prided itself on fairness, never favoring exceptionally gifted students or granting them special status. As a result, the academy had difficulty attracting truly extraordinary talent. Most prodigies had high pride, and in other academies, they were elevated above regular students, enjoying numerous privileges. These benefits were hard to resist, and naturally, such talents were unwilling to join North Song Spiritual Academy. Moreover, the other 4 great academies had long histories, having been established far earlier than North Song Spiritual Academy. It was said that within those academies were hidden places for ultimate cultivation, capable of greatly enhancing a student's power, making already talented individuals even more formidable. In contrast, North Song Spiritual Academy, despite having the North Song Gate, had been closed for years, leaving its top students' abilities far behind those of the other academies. As a result, their performance in the Spiritual Academy Grand Competition had been poor, often becoming a laughingstock. However, this time, North Song Spiritual Academy would reopen the North Song Gate, and they hoped this would help bridge the gap. Headmaster, do we know which exceptionally talented students have emerged from the other 4 great academies this time? Chen asked thoughtfully. Shin Songxing and the others also turned their attention to Grand Song Academy headmaster, clearly curious about the answer. The other 4 great academies are far more established than ours, and they have attracted more geniuses, some even through special means, Grand Song Academy headmaster said with a wry smile. From what we know, in terms of the number and quality of top students, North Song Spiritual Academy is still at a disadvantage. A clamor erupted. Inside the grand hall, everyone was in an uproar, their eyes wide in shock. It was one thing for the Northern Sky Spirit Academy to have Chen, this monstrous prodigy, but now it seemed that even the other 4 great spirit academies had such freakishly talented individuals. Chen's eyes narrowed, and he looked up, locking his gaze on Dean Taitsong. He spoke softly. What is the name of the person from Sacred Spirit Academy? Dean Taitsong gave him a deep, lingering look before